Hey y'all, welcome to the debut episode, hopefully, of Pat Squares. For those of you who are new to the whole channel, what's going on here is my name is Adam Marsland, and Karma Frog 1 is the YouTube channel for my record company and my YouTube travel show, Adam Walks Around. And in February of 2021, we're having a Patreon drive, and during it, we are trying out some new video ideas. So this is like a pilot episode. And if y'all enjoy it and gets a lot of views and people are into it, we'll keep doing it. And if not, we'll just quietly forget it ever happened. So, who am I? Why am I doing a Beach Boys podcast? Really glad you asked. Well, first of all, I got the idea for this looking at the videos of a guy named Giggins. This guy. He has these videos where he just talks about Beach Boys albums. And, I happened across it one day and it's pretty interesting. Even though I know these albums really well, just looking at this guy talking about albums, I thought that's pretty kind of cool. And then I thought, well, I could do that. As a musician, I've probably performed and learned more Beach Boys songs than anybody whose name isn't Brian, Mike, Carl, Dennis, or Al, or isn't a wonderment. And on the geeky side, I've hung out with a lot of the people around the Beach Boys and some of the preeminent geek types who have all the knowledge of the Beach Boys stuff. We geek out over real obscure things. And in fact, consulting me on this very podcast are two of the preeminent Beach Boys geeks in the world. Craig Slowinski, who basically is the authority on who played what on Beach Boys records, and Alan Boyd, who is the Beach Boys archivist and who basically has heard more Beach Boys music than anybody else in the world. And we've collaborated a little on some of my questions for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of do something a little bit from the musician's side and a little bit from the totally geeking out side. And I think we're going to start out by just starting to examine the albums from the beginning, kind of through whenever we get sick of doing that. The first Beach Boys album was called Surfin Safari. Now I know some of you geeks are going to jump in and say, but wait, Adam, there was the Hype Morgan sessions. Yeah, okay, we're not going to get into that stuff. We're going to do just the basic albums first. We can get into the really weird stuff later. So, Surfin Safari, first album, came out, oh, sorry, Giggins, we'll get back to you. Surfin Safari, Wikipedia here, tells us it was released October 1st, 1962. It was recorded in April, August, and September 1962. And in fact, we will be referring liberally to the excellent Bellagio10452.com website, which is maintained by Andrew G. Doe, another of the preeminent Beach Boy scholars, if you will, and also a good friend. Oh, one other thing I want to say about this is I have actually played with a few of the Beach Boys, but I'm not currently drawing a paycheck from them, and considering I'm living on the other side of the world, probably will never be. So we're going to let this be a little bit irreverent. Beach Boys, people around the periphery can get a little touchy about stuff. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell where any bodies are buried, share any confidences, and everything's going to be respectful, but let's have a little fun with this. We know this stuff. Let's just have a good time, right? Okay, so we start our history of the Surfin Safari album. The Beach Boys have a big local single at the end of '61. It's recorded at a studio run by a guy named Hype Morgan. It's Ocean something. We'll get back to that. Then they do another session where they cut primitive versions of Surfin Safari and Surfer Girl. That's in February of '62. Then Murray, the Wilson brothers' dad, goes to Capitol Records, basically bullies them into, well, I guess he doesn't really bully them yet, but he gets them a record contract. Pretty cool. Thanks, Dad. Got a record contract. Second single, Surfin Safari, breaks out in Phoenix, of all places, and they're on their way. Surfin Safari makes it to number 12, I want to say. Let's see. I don't know. Somewhere around there. Top 20, top 15. So, Capitol says, all right, let's go make an album, and this is where our Beach Boys history begins. So, a couple things about this album before we get into the track by track. One of the interesting things about the Surfin Safari album is they hadn't really locked in their vocal sound yet, and it's the only Beach Boys album where they single-tracked their backing vocals. Now, for those of you that aren't hip to studio lingo, What that means is for most of the Beach Boys albums, in fact, pretty much all of them except for this one, they double tracked their vocals. And so in modern recording, and even as far back as the early 60s, you have several different tracks on recording tape. And nowadays on digital, of course, it's a zillion, billion tracks. But in those days, it was 3 tracks, and it became 4, and then it became 8. But on each one of those tracks, you can individually record an element of the song that you can balance independently of the other parts of it. So what they would do is they would sing all their parts, get around a mic or 2 or 3 mics, and they would put that down to one track of the tape. And then they would sing the exact same thing again. And that created this very rich, vibrant, kind of punchy sound that is the sort of the trademark of their early hits. But Surfin Safari, they basically just did it one time. They didn't have enough tracks. They hadn't really fully developed their sound yet. And you can tell it's actually a little bit weak vocally. The vocals sort of lack oomph, they lack power, and some of that is due to the fact that they were just single tracking the vocals. Another issue there was they were kind of pitchy, especially Dennis. If you listen to a lot of these tracks, you can hear him really stick out of the harmony tracks here. He's almost like lead background vocalist, and yeah, he's pitchy a lot of the time. Brian and Carl, especially Carl, a little bit pitchy in the background too. They hadn't really locked in their sound yet, but Dennis, you really hear him, as Murray would say, flatting quite a bit. However, there's another thing to talk about here, and that is one of the reasons the double tracking of the Beach Boys is so powerful is the Beach Boys actually don't sing in perfect tune. They are a little pitchy. A lot of what makes their thing work is the blend of the brothers and the cousin, and the sort of the tightness of the movement of the vocal blocks. Al Jardine once pointed this out, that a lot of what makes their vocal special is the slight differences in intonation between the first pass of the vocal and the double track vocal. That creates this sort of tension between the two tracks, and it has a lot more grit, has a lot more vibrancy than, say, let's compare them to the to the Bee Gees, another great brother harmony band, and their vocals are basically perfect. They're almost too perfect, not to diss the Gibb brothers, but if you think about how Bee Gees records sound, where they sound flawless, at least the later ones, and then you think about the Beach Boys ones that have a little more width, a little more grain to them. That's sort of the difference, because the Bee Gees are just pitch Nazis. You know, they're just like, everything's got to be just right. Beach Boys, they're more about the feel, you know, and it creates a different kind of vibe. But on the Surfin Safari record, that's not in place yet. The blend isn't really there. Vocally, this album's a little weak, but they were kids. I think Mike was 21. Carl, I think, had not even turned 15 when they recorded this. Is that right? Yeah, well, somewhere 14, 15. And they barely know how to play their instruments. I mean, Dennis and Brian had only just started playing drums and bass, respectively, the previous year, if I'm not mistaken. So, considering they just kind of threw it together and they're in the studio for the first time, this is not a really bad record instrumentally. I mean, it's not a patch on some of the quote real surf bands of the time. You know, Dick Dale would have slaughtered them, you know, in '62. The other element to this album that makes it sound a little puny relative to what came later is it's the only album that, to my knowledge, they recorded at the Capitol Records recording studio, which is a recording studio complex they had in the basement. I've actually been there once with Al Jardine, as a matter of fact. And Brian didn't really like the studio very much. He didn't like the environment. He didn't like the sound, and he had already cut a few tracks with the guy that was going to be his right-hand man throughout the 60s, an engineer named Chuck Britz, at a studio called Western Recorders, and he really liked Chuck Britz, and one of the first big battles that the band did when this album was over, was to go to Capitol and say, hey, we're going to cut over at Western, so suck it, guys. So, Surfin Safari album, you know, as debuts go, like I said, it's a little puny relative to how their records would sound, but as a bunch of kids going in to cut a record, it's got considerable charm, and it's pretty cool. So let's go down track by track, and let's talk a little bit about this. One of the fun things for this, for me, I hope, is having lived and breathed this band's music for so long, and then having sort of gotten tired of it and moved away from it, going back and listening with fresh ears, seeing what pops out at me. So, Surfin Safari, the hit. First thing I've noticed is that I've been doing it wrong all these years, because at the top it goes, let's go surfing now, everybody's learning how, come on a safari with me. No, it doesn't go up. The backgrounds go down. Let's go surfing now, everybody's learning how, come on a safari with me. Been doing it wrong in every band I've ever played it in. Oops, sorry, Brian. Vocal stack, to my ear, it is Mike, of course, is doing the lead, and sometimes bass harmony. Then you've got Dennis on the bottom, Carl, and then Brian on top. This is a little bit unusual because actually you would think it would be otherwise, because Carl has such a high, beautiful voice. But when he was singing backup, Carl liked to be in what I would call the tonic position. See, in the early days, Brian would be on top, woo, way up there, and then the guy beneath him, sort of the high tenor. When Al Jardine joined the band, it would generally be Al, and before that, it would often be Dennis singing up there, and Carl would be the third guy down from Brian. That's where he liked to be. It's actually the easiest of the parts to sing, and since Carl kind of had the lead position on guitar, it makes sense that he'd want the sweet spot for the vocals. But in the early days, it seems like they kind of mixed and matched. Like it seemed like if they had an easy part, they gave it to Dennis. Carl's like half as loud as he is. I have to assume, because this is the deal throughout, that this was an issue with the positioning of the microphones and the way Dennis sang. And in fact, on the back cover of the Surfin Safari album, you can see Dennis on a mic go, oh! And then you can see Brian kind of holding him back like, dude, shut up. Moving on to County Fair. There's a lot going on in this song. You have already 2 new cast members added to this new band. You've got the Carnival Barker and the woman who's amazing, I gotta say. So I asked the lads who these people were, because I didn't know, although I had kind of thought that the Barker was Nick Vinay. I was proved correct. Nick Vinay was the producer that Capitol assigned the Beach Boys for the album, although apparently Brian and Murray really produced the album and Nick just kind of called the takes and stuff like that. But he does a hell of a job being the Carnival Barker here. Incidentally, I met Nick Vinay right before he died in the mid-90s, and he told me nothing of value. So we'll skip that and go on to the woman, who apparently is David Marks's aunt, and her name is Andrea Carlo, and she is hilarious. I love the way she goes, woo! It's like, I'm sorry, this just tickled me. You got this woman spitting insults at Mike, loser, and it's my first moment on this album I really love. It's the end of County Fair, where everything's just going nuts. The other comment I have about this is Mike's lead vocals. He's pretty much lead vocalist on almost everything on this record. He doesn't have it quite together yet. He's real pitchy on this song. You can kind of hear his voice cracking at a few points. But, you know, I love the sort of self-deprecating aspect of the song where, you know, Mike's not Mr. Macho. He's just totally, he's in this situation he's not doing really well. The next track is 10 Little Indians. This was the follow-up to Surfin Safari, and you hear this and you go, why? Well, good question. Well, there was a hit at the time called Runnin' Bear, which was it the Big Bopper that did it? I don't remember who did it. But it was Runnin' Bear, Love Little White Dove. Not a very politically correct song, but anyway, it's about a Native American love story. And Capitol didn't think that the surf thing was gonna stick, so they said let's jump on the unpolitically correct Native American love story fad, because that's going places. And 10 Little Indians became their lowest charting single until, oh God, probably Friends, maybe? It didn't make the top 40. It's a snappier mix than the rest of the album, though. I noticed they've got the background vocals are a lot more up front. They're a lot more vivid. And at some point, there's 2 sets of backing vocals. I don't know how they did that. I asked Alan and Craig. They don't know. They don't know how it was done either. You can really hear David Marks' rhythm guitar on the break when Carl's playing, and I gotta say that he's a really underrated part of the band's early sound. And I didn't really appreciate this until I worked with David. I actually know Dave pretty well and actually produced an album of his. So I've heard a lot of Dave's guitar playing. And I remember there was one time we were working on something. It was with a band called the Aphonics, and they were a surf band. And he was overdubbing a part on top of them, and he started doing that that 8-note sort of downstroke thing that you hear throughout these records, and right away it started to drive the track. And I really heard at that moment how much he added to the energy level of the original band, particularly because if you think about the rhythm section, Brian and Dennis, they did fine. Especially considering they've only been playing for a year, but they didn't have a lot of tricks. Dennis was kind of doing Brian's bass lines in those days pretty much were like kind of like that, do 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 do, or like bum, bum, bum. That's Brian. So it was kind of down to the guitars to make these tracks happen, and they kind of do. And Dave was a big part of that. On to the track 4, Chug-A-Lug. Give me some root beer. Give me a break. Do they even have root beer now? I'm in my 50s, obviously. I'm old enough that, when I grew up, we had root beer. It was a pretty cool soft drink. It's one of the better ones. But, come on. Give me some root beer. So you have in there a bunch of little autobiographical vignettes of various members of the band, plus some random friends whose identities are still being debated to this day. That's a bit of trivia that does not interest me at all. But on this track, we have our first moment of what I would call vocal magic from the Beach Boys. When it goes, here a mug, there a mug, everybody chug-a-lug, and all 4 of the guys lock in on those words. It locks right at that moment, and you hear, oh, this is going to be good. This is the Beach Boys. This is the kind of punch that we like to hear from these guys that they really started to perfect around 64. That one moment, here a mug, there by everybody chug-a-lug, that's pretty rad. This is the second track that has an organ break. These were done by Brian. According to my experts, they were done on the same track as the vocals, so presumably what they would do is they would cut the vocals, and then you'll notice the organ is in places where there aren't any background vocals, so they most likely Brian kind of went in and dropped the part in, and then they hopefully got out in time to not erase the vocals. My other favorite thing about this track is the ending. One of those great Mike Love hooks, one of the first of many. Leader of the mug now, Chug-A-Lug Lug now. I love that because the whole song is so frickin' ridiculous, and so they give us this little bit of, goofballness. Next song, Little Miss America, and we have a new lead singer. It is Dennis, a man who is going to have a very interesting and checkered career. It starts right here, singing this romantic ballad written by Herb Alpert. How did this happen? I don't know. I asked Craig and Alan. They seemed very disinterested in this question, but they basically said Dennis was already singing a lot live, kind of working his whole sex appeal thing. Yeah, I'm so in love with you. Anyway, so I got to say that you could make an argument this is the best lead vocal on the album. Mike, he's still a little awkward. I mean, he's making it work. But he doesn't quite have that, whole Mike Love swag that we're used to having from him. The other guys, we'll get to that. Dennis, it's a very pleasant sounding vocal. It sounds to me like there's a non-group member on the backing stack in the middle harmony, and I asked the guys, and nobody commented. So I guess we'll never know. But I'm pretty sure there's somebody in there that's not a Beach Boy. But who that is, don't know. How Herb Alpert got the tune to them, I guess, was this a hit? I should have researched this. Let's research this real quick. Is it Little Miss America? Is that what it's called? My Miss America. Everlast. It's not that song. Let's see. Wait a minute. Everlast. Beach Boys doing an Everlast song. That does get you thinking, doesn't it? Little Girl, You're My Miss America. Did I call it Little Miss America? I should do an Everlast broadcast, I guess. It's a song. It was first recorded by Dante and his friends. Yeah, I have no idea. It doesn't seem like it was a hit, so how they got wind of this tune, I don't know. Dennis liked it, apparently. Okay, 409. This was, I believe, a charting B-side to Surfin Safari, if I'm not mistaken. Certainly one of their best known of their earlier tracks. According to my sources, Gary Usher, who is co-writer of the song, is singing, is doubling Dennis on the background vocals. Dennis, I might add, is super flat on the last chorus. Listen for Dennis, and I suppose Gary might be flatting along with him, along with Everlast, I guess. 409, as I think I said earlier, was one of two tracks that was recorded at Western Recorders and brought into the album after the fact. And yeah, not much more to say about that. Okay, so we opened side 2, because records used to have 2 sides. I guess they do now. I can't keep track of all the formats. Surfin'. Their debut single came out in December '61, made number 3 in LA, and I think number 79 nationally on the Candix and X labels. This song has founding member Al Jardine. He's playing stand-up bass. Dennis is not playing drums, apparently not up to snuff in rehearsals. So Brian played a snare drum. Interesting fact from, I believe, Greg, I asked why Brian, supposedly he played the drum on this with a pencil. I said, why the pencil? Apparently he didn't. He played brushes on the drums, but there was a little snafu because Al Jardine, who had rented all the equipment, rented the drum and he didn't get any sticks. So apparently there was a deal where at some point he was tapping on the drum with his finger, and then Al went back to the store and got brushes, and the rest is history. So Brian played drums with a pencil on the B-side, which was a song called Luau. He played drums with brush on the A-side, Surfin'. Al Jardine plays a stand-up bass. Carl plays some pretty rockin' hula guitar. It's got a very cool little early 60s Hawaiian vibe to it. Interesting fact, Al and Dennis are doubling on the middle harmony, and you can hear them break apart at 2 minutes into the song. There's a place where they do it like that double part. Surfing is the only life, me, now come on pretty baby and surf with me. You can hear Dennis go, and come, oops, I screwed up. He doesn't say that, but that's what he's thinking. And Al keeps singing, so you can hear their voices peel off there. But Al is singing on that, and he's singing the same part as Dennis. And then once again, it's the middle harmony. Carl's on bottom, Brian's on top. This was recorded at World Pacific, was the name of Height Morgan's studio, the guy that gave them their first shot recording, friend of their dad's, Murray Wilson. Murray also sped up the track, as he frequently did, to make them sound more youthful. Not much more to say about Surfin', except it's the song that got him started. It worked. Pretty amazing story, if you think about it. Okay, so moving on. Heads I win, tails you lose. Okay, this is the first song that has what I would consider a really interesting chord progression. Like with it, every time we have a fight, dump, dump. Every time we have a fight, we get it in the tears right. I don't know if that's the key or not. I'm just winging it. But everything up to this point is, not too far removed from your standard doo-wop progressions and stuff like that. This is the first one that we've got something kind of different going on. But having said that, another thing that made Brian's work so compelling is the great vocal melodies, and there really aren't a lot of great melodies on this album relative to what is going to come later, and you really hear that on this track is the melody is it's really just pretty lame melody. The hook's good, heads I win, tails you lose, heads in, but we're not there yet. That's basically what I'm saying. It sounds like Carl on the bottom of the three-part harmony stack, Dennis in the middle, and super loud as he is throughout this record. Moving on, Summertime Blues, cover of the Eddie Cochran. Is Eddie Cochran right? Not Hank Cochran, right? I should know this right. Yep, Eddie Cochran. Oh God, a million music people are writing me off right now for even questioning that. A fairly pedestrian cover of a great song. It's Carl and Dave Marks singing, or is it? Craig Slowinski says, and I quote, so don't get all up in my grill, especially you, Dave, if you get mad at me. It's apparently Nick Vinay, their producer, who I met and exchanged no substantial information with before he died. It's apparently Nick Vinay singing with Brian and Carl, which confused me again because I don't hear Brian on the lead vocal, and not David as I once thought. David is there in the studio during the vocal overdub, apparently wearing a fake beard, but Nick's right there too, and definitely, quote, on mic. So there's a little bit of mystery. It's definitely Carl on the bottom harmony. Who's on top? Dave Marks, Nick Vinay, random guy with a beard. We just don't know. It's not a great cover. It is what it is. Whatever. Moving on. Cuckoo Clock. This is the song I'm most excited to talk about. This song's kind of awesome. I never really appreciated it before. This is Brian's only lead vocal on the album. He, like everybody else, he doesn't really have it together yet. He's kind of pitchy. In fact, that double tracking process that I told you about before, this really helped the guys in their lead vocals, especially Brian, because well, it's been building up inside of me for I don't know how long. When you have to cross from your normal voice into the falsetto range in the head voice and back down again, it's really easy to go like that. And if you're recording just in single track and you hear this on the Cuckoo Clock, the crossover notes, there's all these little cracks in your delivery. It's really, really hard, especially if you're 20 and doing your second or third lead vocal, to get every little bit of those exactly in tune. And if you don't, you're really exposed up in that range. So, some pitchiness on Brian's vocal, but tons of character. And the lyrics are really kind of awesome. Now, most of the songs on this album were co-written by Brian and Gary Usher, who is his collaborator of the moment. And this is no different. And this is telling the story basically of some teenage kids who are kind of making out on the couch and going for second, maybe third, we don't know. But, Brian's making his play, and then there's this cuckoo clock on the wall, and it keeps blowing the mood. Definitely when you're a kid, you know, and you're trying to make your first moves, and you're trying to get everybody comfortable and feel safe, and you know, just trying to set a vibe. And anything can blow it, and this song really gets to that experience. And there's all kinds of little bits of this idea in the lyric, like where Brian says the fire had almost died. In other words, you know, he was there, and then, you know, things got disrupted. And I just love this vignette. You know, it's so true to life. And finally, I love how they handle it. He just takes and destroys the clock. I mean, that's great. That's funny. Okay, so by the way, with Brian on the lead vocal, Dennis is on the top of the harmony stack to my ear. Also, another thing about this is Brian's bass playing, as I just showed you, is pretty rudimentary throughout this record. But this song has a pretty cool little groove to it. Yeah, doom, 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 doom. And I actually asked myself, is this Brian? And Alan Boyd forwarded me nothing from his secret archives, but something that's out there, you know, in bootleg land, I guess. The instrumental track. And the plot got thicker because to my ear, it is a picked bass part. And if you ever see video of Brian playing the bass, he plays with his thumb. So I'm like, is this really Brian? Because, you know, it's kind of a grooving little bass part, and I'm hearing like that kind of plucked sound. Craig pointed out that Brian had been known to use a pick from time to time, and Bruce Johnston also said that Brian would actually use his thumbnail as a pick, which is really interesting. But the theory was that perhaps Carl did the bass on it. But then you hear Brian on the session tapes, which would only leave guitar for Brian to be playing. It's whether Brian can play guitar or not is an open question. He played guitar in a few things, but it wasn't, you know, it was sort of plucking notes, kind of like on the bass. But this is an unusually jangly guitar thing. It's not that kind of tight downstroke thing that you hear on the rest of the record. So could Carl have played the bass and Brian played rhythm guitar? Interesting question. I have no evidence of that. Just putting it out there. By the way, if you look at the back cover of the record, everybody's playing bass in this record. You see Carl playing bass, you see Brian playing bass, you see Mike playing the bass. Is Mike playing the bass on this song? I doubt it. But anyway, Moondog. Speaking of Carl being places we don't expect, the drums on this are by Carl. And I can only guess the reason for that is that roll at the beginning, which is kind of tricky, and Carl doesn't quite nail it, but he gets by. I'm guessing nobody else in the band could play that roll. And it's interesting because once the roll's over, the drums are kind of gone. You can barely hear them. I really like this track. I like it's got kind of a cool, spooky vibe. It's an instrumental. It slots very well in with a lot of the instrumentals of the era. It's interesting. The beginning is, you can't really tell what key it's in. It's a little strange. I seem to recall there was an outside musician on this track. I don't remember the details of that. I just remember hearing that somewhere. Maybe you can put in comments if you know. Who's the Dawg? I think I read somewhere that it's Nick Venet. In fact, let's see if Wikipedia nope, doesn't tell us anything. By the way, this song was written by one Derry Weaver. And it was originally done by a band called The Gamblers, one of whose members was Bruce Johnston. Dun, dun, dun. So that's very interesting. Also, one other thing, if you listen very carefully on Moondog, there's a very noticeable edit at 1 minute and 17 seconds. The last song on Surfin Safari is called The Shift. The Shift is not about the gear shift, it's about some long forgotten piece of women's clothing that apparently got Mike Love up in a dander. Got another pretty nondescript song. Only thing to say about this is Dennis is again pretty loud in the backing vocals, but we already knew that. And then on the original CD Twofers, there's a bonus track for that didn't make it on the album called Land Ahoy. Kind of a cool song. It's your standard sailor missing his girl kind of narrative. Has a chorus where we go land ahoy, lapa stoy lahoy. I don't know what a stoy is or how you lop it. That is one of the great mysteries for the ages. You know, it's another pretty lame melody, but you know, the song is kind of a cool little vibe. Overview of the album, you know, for a bunch of kids that are doing this for the first time, it's pretty decent. You know, I was recording at the same age as they were, and I can promise you it wasn't as good as Surfin Safari, even though, you know, yeah, it wasn't as good. It isn't the band that we were gonna get, but it is the band in its purest form. I mean, it's mostly the guys just playing their own instruments. There's very little, if any, outside instrumentation on it. And it's pretty much a very simple, basic format of Mike singing the lead vocals and the Wilson brothers singing, you know, the three-part harmony with possibly a little bit of help here and there. If you asked me to rate the album, I would give it a 6. You know, it's got a vibe. You know, if you break it down song by song, there's only a couple of greats. I mean, the Surfin Safari is great. 409, you know, it's a really cool car song, got a great lyric. And then, you know, I'm very fond of Cuckoo Clock, Dawg. You know, the rest of it's, you know, whatever. But yeah, I mean, as a listening experience, as a moment in time, fly on the wall, it's pretty damn cool. So that's my take on Surfin Safari. If you would like to see more of this show, please leave a note in comments, share it, and I encourage you to subscribe to the Karma Frog 1 YouTube channel. If you want to support us, please go to Patreon, patreon.com/KarmaFrog1. And once again, to subscribe to the channel, there's the Karma Frog logo right here. Just click on that. And I'm Adam Marsland. Good night.